All right. I'm ready when you are, buddy.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome to the Interstate Gamers Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, a.k.a. K-Slex.
My name is Peter, a.k.a. Deal for Real, and I'm also your host.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to the 56th episode of the Interstate Gamers Podcast, Season 5, Episode 7. Once again, it's taken us a while to get this episode out, but you know what? That's okay. You guys are used to it by now. Just enjoy our content.
Stop bugging us, man. We're doing our best. Like, literally, no one has been bugging us.
But so we're here, and we've got a new game, which I'm sure you've read the title, and some of you may or may not know this game. But Peter, would you like to introduce this game for the ones who don't know what this game is?
It would be my distinct pleasure. The game that we're reviewing today is called West of Loathing.
Yeehaw, partner.
Yeehaw. Clam it again and yeehaw. So West of Loathing is a comedy RPG. It is a very funny game. One could say, and I will say later, that the humor is really what drives the game. But there is an interesting kind of story behind it. So West of Loathing came out in 2017 for the PC, and then came out on Switch the next year. Which, by the way, what did you play it on?
Switch.
Nice, me too. So it came out in 2017, 2018, developed by Asymmetric Publications, who back in 2003 had developed a game called Kingdom of Loathing, which was an MMORPG that was done in a similar visual style to this game, like very kind of crudely drawn stick figures, very charming. Cool thing about that game, I never played it, but it was pretty big for like around a decade or so, it seemed. Like it had like a pretty nice core audience or player base, I guess would be the word.
Huh.
And it was funded almost entirely by donations from what I read. They didn't do like advertising or subscription fees or anything like that. So like, we in the Smash scene like our grassroots content. So definitely a grassroots game. But yeah, they made this a single player game, West of Loathing, more recently. And both games have been pretty well reviewed. So I had this game on my radar even like when I first got the Switch, and I've been kind of wanting to play it, and I thought it'd be fun to talk about on the show because it's kind of like a short, kind of, funny, amusing game. I'm pretty excited. Do you have any comments to say before we start getting into the meat and potatoes?
Well, in terms of my experience with the game, this is the first time I've played it, but I'd seen some gameplay of it, and I've always been just kind of like, what game is that? And I've heard about it. But I can't say I was like super like excited to play it. I was kind of like, what exactly is this game going to be? But I think, it turned out I was really glad that I played it. And also that piece of trivia that you gave about like Kingdom of Loathing. I never knew any of that stuff, so that's pretty cool. It seems like there's a good amount of lore involved with this game. So I'm excited to talk about it and see our different viewpoints and stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we can go ahead and get into the gameplay. I know that you like to kick off this section.
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and get into the gameplay. So I think it's surprisingly in depth for an RPG. I honestly didn't expect that. Like, given the silly nature of the game, I thought they would just kind of take that aspect of like really anything in terms of gameplay would just be driven around comedic effect and not really care about how fun it was. But now, I mean, they spent a lot of time making the game pretty fun to play, despite which complements the comedic value that the game brings. It is really funny, and because it's so funny, it actually kind of makes it a little bit more engaging.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really like, I really liked the turn-based battle system. I really liked the fact that you don't have to spend time like healing yourself up or worrying about that. It's like when you're in the battle, that's the only thing you have to worry about at that time. And if you win that battle, then you don't have to worry about like altering your stats or healing yourself up for the next battle. I mean, there is some kind of like, there's a multiple day system to where like, you know, if you eat something, drink something, there's like spleen and stomach or whatever, stuff like that. There's different aspects to that you can boost your stats with, but there's nothing like outside of the battle itself that you have to worry about. So like if your partner faints or dies or whatever, they're going to be right there with you in the next battle. So I thought that was pretty cool. It makes it, it definitely keeps the pace on track, I would say, because otherwise the game would probably feel even more slow. I do feel like the game lacks a lot of speed and there's a lot of reading involved.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably a little bit of a negative in my eyes, that it kind of slows the game down a lot in that aspect. But I think it does kind of compensate for that in terms of like the battling system. So
yeah, it is pretty convenient. I think when I first realized that myself and my partner were going to heal after every battle, I was like, oh shit, that's awesome. Like I love not having to like manage all these healing items in my inventory. I mean, you can use healing items during battle, but like, you know, after the battle, it's all reset, and like you don't have to, you know, backtrack to the Pokemon Center or whatever. It's really nice. I find it interesting that you came out the gate saying that the game had a good amount of depth, because I kind of feel the opposite in terms of like the combat specifically. Well, I guess I should back up a little bit and say some more like explanatory things before I get to my verdict. So there's not all too much in terms of like stats and equipment and things. Well, there's a lot of equipment you can put on, but they all kind of alter the same three core stats, which is muscle, mysticality, and moxie. And that basically translates into muscle being like physical attack and defense, mysticality being like magic or spells, attack and defense, and then moxie being gun, attack and defense. The class of character that you choose at the beginning of the game will determine like which of those your skill set tends to favor. But you can kind of like, you have the option to allocate your experience that you gain to whatever stats you want. And there's like a bunch of things you can increase and decrease, and a bunch of like spells and moves and like items that you can use and things you can learn. So there is like a lot of depth in that sense, where there's like a lot of things for you to like navigate in the menu and like pay attention to. But I think that when it comes down to actually battling, that it can be too simple, or it can be cheesed in such a way that makes it too simple. For instance, I found that most fights in my experience were pretty trivial, to where like it just took a few turns for me to kill the enemy, and then there's no real stakes or anything like that. But then the battles that were harder, I could kind of just like spam all my combat and all my healing items. Another thing is that most of the items that you use, they don't end your turn. So you can like, if you have offensive items, you can just like use those over and over and over again on the enemy. And then you can finally end your turn. And by the time you're done with that, you're like halfway or more through the battle. So like for all of the stuff that you can get in the game and like the stats that there are and all the equipment and stuff, I feel like it's kind of negated by the fact that like you can buff yourself up to like a reasonable degree and then just go and like steamroll most of the enemies by abusing the items.
What class did you start out by choosing?
I chose the Snake Oiler, which is focusing on Moxie, which is the gun related stat. And the Snake Oiler can also like extract oil from snakes to create poisons and potions and stuff. It's pretty fun.
Yeah.
That's another thing. I didn't end up using too many things besides just like my gun and my like melee attack. Like there's all these other skills that I learned, but I just never really felt like sometimes I'd use them for fun to see what they would do, but I never felt like they were the most practical option. So I don't know. But what about you? What class did you choose?
I chose I think it's called like the Bean Slinger, maybe. The Mysticality track. And I think maybe that's why we had such a different experience with maybe thinking about how in depth it was, because there's a lot of different things you can do with magic that make it kind of it makes it kind of fun. So like you can like boost different stats, or like you can like put down other people's stats. Like there's certain moves that do that, or there's like different kinds of magic moves that you could do to attack all people at once, or do like put this guy on fire. There's like all different sorts of combinations that you can do to make like each turn that you do kind of unique. And then to add to that, I felt like, the mysticality one worked really well with my partner. I chose Doc. I don't know who you chose. Doc Alice.
Yeah, I ended up going with Crazy Pete. I like Pete's myself.
Makes sense.
But I didn't even... So I started the game like quite a while back and then took a pretty long break before I finished it. And I can't remember back to when I first started it. Like, I can't remember consciously choosing to go with Pete. I thought like maybe he was... Like, it just seemed like he was there and he was the person I needed to take. So it wasn't until like recently that I was looking and saw that there's like 3 or 4 different partners you can have. So I don't know.
I thought Alice was a really nice partner because obviously she can heal you, but she eventually gets this perk where she can instantly kill like a skeleton. So I thought that was a pretty fun way to shake things up. There's just like different kinds of moves that do different things to different enemies and have different effects in terms like and things like that. That I guess I found it pretty in depth in terms of that. I don't know if like difficulty may not be super difficult, but I don't know. There was a lot of different ways that you could complete a battle. And I thought that was also very evident, like when, I don't know if you did this quest, but like, did you do the quest with the Dungeons and Dragons like game board?
Yeah, where you like meet these people at a fortress and they're playing like a board game and you join in.
Yeah. Yeah, I did all of them and like all the battles there for the board game. And I felt like it did a really good job of showing how many different ways there are, like how many different ways to reach the same outcome. Anyway, I think the game's really in depth. I guess we differ a little bit there, but it may be due to the way that we started the game out and made our own. Like, there's different choices. So like, there's a lot of different outcomes for this game, which I thought was really cool. And maybe that played into how we view the depthness of the game.
The depth.
The depth.
The deepness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it would be interesting, like, sometime down the road for me to replay it with one of the different classes and see how that goes, and with a different partner as well. It's a fairly short game, so, like, that's something that would be pretty feasible to do.
Yeah.
The next time I get the itch. And also, like, we tend to talk about the player's ability to, like, make a game difficult or easy, and I think that this game definitely has that flexibility, too. So, like, if I wanted to, I could have told myself, now, Peter, like, let's not use this cheesy item that will, like, pretty much get us an easy win. Like, I could have not done that, but like I was more interested in kind of exploring and seeing what there was to see.
Yeah.
I was more interested in that than I was in fighting. So like,
true.
I wasn't really valuing the, my integrity in combat so much, which I hate to say, I like my integrity, but.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's kind of my viewpoint on it as well. And actually, interestingly enough, at some point in the game, you go to this cave and you can actually find it. This is very interesting. I've never seen it done like this, but you can actually find something like an item in the game or a switch or something that like literally turns the game to hard mode.
Yeah.
Now it warns you before you like flip the switch that, hey, this is going to make the game really hard. But like there is a way to make the game harder. So I thought that was pretty cool. And that might also improve your experience in terms of challenging your epic gamer skills.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very cool how they did that.
Did you die at all?
Yeah, I died a few times.
Because I would run into some enemies that I was clearly not ready to fight, but I had no way of knowing that I wasn't ready to fight them.
Yeah.
Like I'd just be like, oh, here's a goblin. And then he just kills me in one shot. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, luckily I ran into those situations too. Like sometimes boss battles were difficult, which makes sense. And then sometimes they were just random encounters because there are a lot of random encounters of varying difficulty. Luckily, dying is not the biggest setback. In fact, like when you die and you go to the next day, when you die, generally you get angry, which actually buffs your stats. But after you die a couple times, you pass out and it turns into the next day, and then you lose your buffs along with any other buffs that you had given yourself, like with food and drink. So there's like a little bit of punishment, but only after a few times. And even then, the punishment's not that bad. Like, you're not having to lose a bunch of progress.
Right.
Which is cool. Like, it does make the game easier in a sense, but also it encourages you to like just go for things and experiment and have fun, because the worst that can happen is you like lose some buffs and you just have to consume more items or something. It's not really that big of a deal.
Yeah, the way that you made a good point there. The way the game is set up is really to let you have a lot of fun with the game, and I think there's different ways to have fun with the game, and obviously the comedy helps, but it's really just a fun game. I encourage anyone to try it out. I can see why people would be apprehensive due to it being like a stick figure, but
honestly, the stick figure like made me want to play the game a little more.
Yeah.
I want to talk briefly about like the overworld, because we've been talking a lot about the battling and related mechanics, but there's also like kind of a minor like exploration aspect to the game, and puzzle elements as well. I think so much of the game's gameplay revolves around like solving like little problems and little puzzles at all of the different like towns and places in the world. You and I were texting about one pretty pretty funny but exasperating quest that involves you like basically dealing with like a small town bureaucracy for longer than you should.
Yeah.
And like that's just one example, but there's other examples of like logic puzzles or like kind of math related puzzles, and none of them are like too crazy. Some of them do involve like memorization or paying attention to details that maybe you didn't realize you had to pay attention to. But there's some variety in that, and I think that's where really like most of the charm from the game is like all of those interactions with characters or with things in the world as you're doing these puzzles and as you're exploring. So I just wanted to shout that out, because I think a lot of the content in the game, which we'll talk about, does come from the overworld and not just the battles.
Yeah. And one thing I do have to say in terms of the overworld and in terms of gameplay, let's say you're going, some quests can be a bit tiresome at times. And I think you touched on that a little bit. And so that's kind of a little bit of a negative for me, but also when you're going on, let's say like a fetch quest or something, it could be really annoying to move around the map when you're having to go from place to place and you basically go through a random encounter when it already takes so long for those stupid shoes to move from like one point of the map to the other point. And I know that doesn't make a lot of sense to people who haven't played the game, but basically when you go from one location to another, there's like these little footprints that kind of pop up to show that where you're traveling along the map. And so usually if you're going to have a random encounter, which is like 90% of the time, probably 90% of the time, it's going to occur like halfway between the destination that you're going to from where you started from the destination you're going to. And that can be annoying when you have to go multiple places to get a quest done.
Yeah.
I found that to be really annoying. Like, oh my gosh, and most of them are like, oh, you can either give up or fight this person. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess I got to fight this person. Some of them you can just kind of like bypass with the menu, but it's still kind of annoying to really even have a dialogue. It just kind of interrupted the pace, I thought.
Yeah. Now, did you see that in the options menu, you can speed up the footprints dramatically?
Yeah, I did see that. I didn't do it, but I probably should have.
Well, maybe you should have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sped them up to like 200%, I think. And then eventually I sped up the battle animations too.
I wanted to play it in its like native state though. But you're right. I guess there is an option to kind of get around that.
Yeah.
But still, having the interruption itself is just kind of annoying.
Yeah. That's kind of all that I have, honestly.
I think we talked about it a good bit, and I think, people have a good sense of what the gameplay is like and how we view it.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the time we've been recording so far, and honestly, it's longer than I thought it would be by this point.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're talking about stick figure combat.
True. Well, I'll go ahead and give my score. I gave it a solid fresh 85.
Nice. I'm a little bit lower. I gave it a 75, which kind of makes sense given that it sounded like our experiences were pretty different.
I honestly had a lot more fun with this game than I thought I would.
That's good. It's good to be surprised in that way.
Yeah.
Good surprises. Cool. Well, now it's time for everyone's favorite section.
Aesthetics.
Aesthetics.
Pete Boy, the visuales. What did you think?
I'll start off by saying, there's a lot of like famous artists from history, like Leonardo da Vinci and Leonardo DiCaprio and people like that. But the art team behind this game, I think, just really set a new standard for graphics in video games. I think that trying to make video games look like anything other than stick figures is honestly just a waste of time, because anytime I saw anything on the screen, I was like, I know what that is. I can tell you what that is. We've talked about games like Metroid Prime that are simply too dark, where my eyes strain to the point of getting bloodshot trying to make out what exactly is in the shadows. In this game, everything is crisp and clear and concise, and I love it so much. But all jokes aside, I do think the art style is really funny, and a lot of the humor is based on like the characters just kind of looking derpy. And the animations are simple as well. There's no like crazy animations that are going on, but I really like it. I love the simplicity, and they actually do get into like some decent amount of detail when they need to. So like things look detailed enough to where there's kind of a sense of life and vibrancy, but not too detailed to where they couldn't just draw it in black and white pencil, right?
Right.
I think the game manages to be surprisingly like visually interesting across the course of the game. So I think they did a really good job with that, honestly. Yeah.
I don't know if that would speak to the visuals more than their creativity, but I don't know. I kind of think that, the game it does work, like the stick figure stuff and the simple artistic nature of it. It does work for the game, especially due to the comedic nature of the game. But that doesn't really make it visually appealing nonetheless. I don't know that I could in good conscience rate it above some of these other games that we've played. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a black and white stick figure game. And honestly, there were several moments in the game, it was hard for me to tell certain things that they wanted to stand out within the environment, that I could like click on or things like that. Sometimes it was very hard to distinguish certain aspects of the environment or items on the ground or something like that. I mean, I kind of, based upon my exploration tendencies, I like to go and try to click on everything, but there were just times where I was like, oh, I needed to go click on that. I was like, that thing didn't really stand out to me, and I easily missed it while walking by because everything kind of blends together. So I was just kind of, I wasn't like super hype on the visuals. And that was one of the reasons why I was kind of like, I don't know about this game when I was going into it. Like, I mean, the box art is literally a stick figure, which is funny, but it's just kind of like, how could it be, And I really liked the game, don't get me wrong, but the visuals weren't the selling point for me.
Well, damn, sounds like we have different opinions. Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned like missing things in the environment. There were like a few times where I noticed, oh, this little like switch or something is kind of subtle, but I can still see it. But I never quite had like enough moments like you described for me to write that down for myself and consider it like a con. But that totally makes sense. Like I understand what you're coming from. So
yeah, and because of that, I always felt like I could be missing something. I was like, I don't know if I've explored X area enough because I feel like I could be missing something at any moment due to it being hard to see stuff. And there were other things, like sometimes menus would get in the way of like what you're looking at. And you'd be like, get out of here. Or like a text box. But it does, as you point out, it is visually creative. So like a lot of the things that they did implement were really fun. I don't know. Wasn't super hype on it.
Yeah. I was pretty hype on it, as you can tell from my from my spiel. Did you see that there's a colorblind compatibility mode in the options?
Yeah.
And the tooltip is like, you never know.
Yeah. And there's also a nostalgia mode.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, that option really helped at night. Because it's so like either black and white, and so the nostalgia mode kind of made it like this warm color, like a warm tint over the whole screen, and it was really nice to play at night because it was easier on the eyes.
Yeah, I keep my TV backlight pretty low already, so when I put on the nostalgia mode, I was like, oh no, that's too much too much darkness. But that's cool that it helped you out, though.
Well, that's going to do it for me on visuals. I don't have too much to say, really.
Same here, boy.
All right, what'd you give it?
Give visuals a nice, hot, fresh AT.
AT, wow. Yeah, we are differing on opinions here. But I will say the score that I give it is very appropriate. I gave it a 69.
Nice.
Yeah. It's only fair for a game that, is comedic in nature. Moving on to the audio, I will say that the soundtrack was pretty decent, and I found it to be pretty soothing at times, and it does a good job of like being a really good, like it puts you in the atmosphere of what the game wanted you to be in. Like definitely an old Western type game, and it does a really good job of setting the mood of whatever area that you're in.
Yeah.
Kudos to the soundtrack for doing that. Nothing super memorable comes out to me except for like the standard soundtrack. It's like, I don't know how to,
Nothing stood out to me except for the thing that I can't sing right now.
The thing I can't sing right now. But just one track basically. And I think the sounds of the game did a really good job of conveying the actions it wanted to convey on the screen. So like shooting a gun or like hitting a skeleton and the skeleton falling apart. Things like that, or like stench power. Things like that. Did a really good job of being funny and also conveying like, because you needed something in terms of sound to really set things apart because everything's so plain visually.
Yeah.
So I think it did a good job of sending a message. I think the audio did a good job of sending a message with this game.
I agree. Yeah, I agree on pretty much everything you said. I have a few elaborations. I think the music could have used more variety, as in like the number of songs, because there's a lot of songs being recycled. And it's a pretty short game, so it's not like, well, it's not that short of a game, but it is fairly short to where it's not the biggest crime in the world to reuse songs. But like, it kind of got old at some point where like, I'm going in a lot of caves and a lot of mines, and they all have like the same music. And there's like a lot of graveyards and other spooky places, and they all have the same music. It's like I kind of would like a little more variety.
Yeah.
And then I wish that they could have like produced the music in such a way that made it like kind of crude, or kind of like crudely recorded in a way that mimics the crude stick figure drawings. Like I thought that would have been a really nice way to complement the visual aesthetic, because like the music sounds like, most of the time, unless it's coming from like a tinny speaker in the game world, most of the time it sounds like pretty crisp and clear and like professionally recorded and all that. And it sounds good, but like, I don't know, I kind of would have liked it to be lo-fi in the way that the graphics are like quote unquote lo-fi. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a missed opportunity.
It would have added to the comedic nature of the game.
Indeed. I really liked the demon cow sound effects. They had like all these demonic moos and stuff, and I guess we'll talk about this in content and like when we briefly discuss the small plot of the game. But yes, there are a lot of demon cows that you encounter, and they have appropriate demonic sound effects, and I thought those were very funny.
Yeah. Overall, though, I would say not really anything to write home about in terms of audio, but I think it was solid enough and all around. Like it worked very well for what it was. But you're not going to see it on the top video game soundtracks of all time list. I would be surprised if you did see it. I would question that list if you did see it on that list.
I agree, man.
Well, I got nothing more to say, really.
I got nothing, partner.
Well, I reckon we ought to give our audio scores.
Why don't you lay it on me, Rabbit?
Well, I gave it a rootin' tootin' shootin' 74.
Oh, my good golly gosh. I gave it a 75.
Well, damn, partner. Might be the only thing we agreed on all day.
Yeah, man, butter my bud, call me biscuit, man, if we ain't agreement on that damn old audio, man.
Well, I think we've annoyed the audience enough.
I think we've discovered a new way to record the entire rest of the show.
Oh, boy. I think that's when people will stop listening to us entirely. So moving on to the content. Pete Boy, you've been alluding to this section the entire time, so why don't you take it away?
Yeah, enough teasing. So we'll get the how long to beat out of the way. Sponsored by How Long to Beat. Not actually sponsored, but may as well be. It says main story about 8 hours, completionist about 18 hours. Now, playing on the good old Nintendo Switch, I think it only tells you in increments of 5 hours, which is great. Like, they don't think we have the brain power to handle any any more detailed numbers than that. But I think I'm at about like 8 hours or so. How about you, by the way? Do you know?
I think I'm somewhere around 15.
Oh, damn. You've been putting in the work.
Yeah. I told you, I tried to check like everything.
Yeah.
And there's still so much more to do.
Yeah, I checked. I felt like I was being pretty thorough, but, you know, of course there's stuff.
It may play into the fact that you sped up all the options and I waited on all the footprints, you know?
It's true.
And that's how much longer over an extended period of time it makes the game take.
Let's not assume that necessarily right away. But anyway, I think content's where the game really shines. I mean, I think the entire point of the game is to be funny, and like the content really is a section where that comes into play, because like just like the joy of meeting like some random character that says some funny shit, and then like having the options of your own funny shit to respond with, and like visually seeing the funny shit and like all that. It just really makes the game what it is, I think. Even like the menu options and the items and like the level up or the post battle screens are funny. And there is a lot of reading, like you said. I think if you don't like reading, you are not going to like this game. And sometimes I was guilty of like kind of speeding through it. But for the most part, I was happy to like sit down and read everything, because I knew that that's where like the heart of the game was, you know?
Yeah. I think for me personally, it would depend upon like how much text there was. So if I opened up a dialogue and there was a wall full of text, and then you could see that there's like another page on top of that, then I was like, oh God. But then there were times where like you'd encounter a character and he would say X thing, and you'd be like, okay. And you'd read as you go along. So it does also a good job. I guess we didn't talk about this in visuals, of like when you're talking to a character, it doesn't show you everything that they say at once. It just shows like the conversation going back and forth.
Yeah.
So that helps a little bit.
Yeah. There is kind of a plot, not really. I guess the value is more in the setting than it is the actual plot. But the plot basically is that you leave home, you leave your family ranch to go west to the city of Frisco and make your fortune. But along the way, you have to be careful, because at some point, the cows came home, the demon cows, and they are out on the loose. And so a lot of the lore of the game revolves around these cows. And it's not like too much lore, at least that I noticed. But it is a fun setting to be in, and like it motivates some of the silly characters. Like some of them are like cow hunters, but then there's also clowns for some reason, and some people are like clown hunters. So it's like,
yeah,
you know, there's a lot of like silly lore that comes into play at various moments, and it's fun. And I like the goblins too. The goblins I thought were always entertaining.
I love the way they're drawn.
Yeah.
I'd never imagine a goblin to look like that. That's pretty funny. Yeah, it's really funny, and it's consistently funny throughout. Definitely huge positive there, and it makes the game really enjoyable to play. Not only that, there are a lot of quests to do and a lot of things that can change the outcome of your game. Mm-hmm. And I think that encourages a lot of replayability. I mean, even the way that you play the game can be different each time. So I think it's a super, it brings a lot of value for what you get. I mean, I think the game right now is what, like $10, $20 maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
Depends on where you get it. So really good value and really good replayability. I think you're right. That's the biggest strength of the game is the content. I mean, just the sheer amount of things to do and possibilities and outcomes, it's just really cool. And well, okay, there is one thing that's kind of like, that I kind of was like, what? As Peter mentioned, you know, the object is to go west, and you don't really realize it from the beginning of the game to the end. But then once you go west, that's it. The game's over. So it's the game ends kind of abruptly, and that's kind of a little bit of a bummer. There's not a lot of a climax. Like you could, and the game ends when you want it to also. Like you can go up to this movie theater, which is brand new to their time, so to speak. And you go up to this movie theater, and it's called The Final Cutscene. And you watch the final cutscene, and it's basically a movie of all of the results of your decisions and things like that. And I didn't realize that, like, once you get to a certain point in the game that, you know, I don't want to give away too much. I don't want to spoil too much, but you do this one quest, I guess you should say, and it completes this long ongoing task that you've been doing. And you don't really realize that once you complete that task, that that's pretty much the end of the game. Like, it's just kind of like, you don't really realize that that is the last thing that you are required to do.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a bummer for me. It was not like a huge climax at the end. And it kind of alludes to building up to some things, that would make for a good climax. But I mean, I don't know. It kind of ended really abruptly, which I didn't like. But other than that, the content's really great.
Yeah. You always have the option to like go back and tie up any loose ends or do whatever side quests you want to. So it's not like you don't get railroaded, pun intended, into the very end of the game. But
yeah.
But yeah, that totally makes sense. I was kind of similarly caught off guard, but not to the point where I felt like too bad about it. I was kind of ready for the game to be over too. You know, as funny as it is, I think that like without gameplay that I found to be like particularly rewarding on its own accord, I didn't want to spend too much more time playing the game. So I was pretty happy with like the 10-ish hours that I put into it. It felt satisfying.
Right.
All right. Well, that's about all I got.
Yeah, that's about all I got too.
I gave content a hot, fresh, rootin' tootin' 90.
Oh, nice. I gave it a rootin' tootin' shootin' 94.
That was a good year, 94.
94. It really was, yeah. I was a whole year old. Okay, well, we're going to do some number crunching, see where this puppy lands, and get back to you after a few short messages from our sponsors. So, see you then.
Well, howdy there, folks. Welcome back, I guess, to the podcast. Going to go ahead and summarize our scores now that we've done the number crunching. I will start with my gameplay, which was a 75. Visuals was an 80. Audio was a 75, which makes my aesthetics a 77.5.
Aesthetics.
And my content was a 90. So all told, my overall score was an 80.8.
Nice. Not too shabby. Solid B from your end. So for my ratings, I gave gameplay an 85. For my visuals, I gave a 69. And the audio is a 74, bringing my aesthetics score to a 71.5. And then my content was a 94, bringing my personal overall score to an 83.5. Which, if you're keeping up, if we're going to calculate the IG score here, is going to be an 82.2. Thus making this game, drumroll please, 38th out of 49 games that we've rated.
Man, this game must suck, right? If it's that far down our list.
Yeah, that must be what you're thinking. But no, we've only we pretty much only play good games. So,
with a few notable exceptions.
With a few notable exceptions, Disney's Tarzan, which was our last episode. So.
Not DreamWorks Tarzan.
Yeah,
only Disney's Tarzan.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, this seems to be pretty in line with the critical consensus that I've seen. I saw a lot of like 8 out of 10s on Metacritic and such, so I think that we're not having a particularly hot take here. Not that we would, because, you know, our take is the correct one, so Why would it be a hot take? I did read a funny little factoid, which is apparently Rolling Stone magazine called this one of the greatest games of the year.
Interesting.
And I was like, you know, maybe like one of the funniest games. Not that I know the funniness of games that came out in 2017. Breath of the Wild, fucking hilarious game though, by the way. But yeah, I just thought that was a funny thing.
That is pretty funny. How big must it have been for the developers to have Rolling Stone call it, like, give it that title?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe someone at Rolling Stone like just really loves spaghetti westerns, and they love stick figures, and they were playing this, and they're like, this game was made for me.
We have to make an article about this. But yeah, I definitely agree with that consensus. It's definitely, you know, a solid game, a fun game. I think you should play it. I had a lot more fun than I thought I would playing it, as I've said. And I think you would too. You viewers at home, listeners, I should say. But overall, not like the best game of all time, but still really fun. And an 85-ish is kind of what I was expecting. And I think we're kind of around that. Yeah, you're right. Metacritic was like, I think Metacritic said 85%. So we're slightly below that, but I think that's about accurate. That pretty much does it for our episode. Hope you've enjoyed it, everyone. As you know, when we close out our episodes, we like to shout out our amazing Patreons. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. For once, I have it ready to go.
Oh my God. Becky.
We've got Dolphin Dasher, Justin Probst, Z-Link, and Ryan Everitt. Thank you for supporting us. You homies have been doing it for quite a while at this point, and we couldn't be here without you guys and all of our supporters and listeners.
Literally impossible. We enjoy all of your support, and definitely appreciate it. Yeah, if you want to keep up with us, certainly the best way is to give us money on Patreon. But if you're interested in more traditional social media, we have Twitter at the IG_cast. And we have Instagram, which I think is just the IG cast. But most importantly, we have a beautiful website coded by Kevin himself, theigcast.com. Click on that shit. Look at our ratings. Look at our logo and our color scheme. It's very cool. And geek out on some numbers. That's why we do the show in the first place.
Hell yeah, brother. Well, all right. I guess that's going to do it for us. This is K-Slug signing off.
I'll stick around for a little while. I got time. I'm not doing anything. Just kidding. I have to go too. Love you guys. See you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Love you too.